Thank you, Danielle, and thanks everyone for taking the time to join us in this webinar. My name is Mehdi. I'm support engineer with Grandstream Networks here in Boston. And for today's webinar, we will cover the call routing management used by the UCM, the Grandstream IP-PBX. Before I get started, if you have any questions, submit them in the Q&A section and I will get back to you with all the answers at the end. So for today's agenda, we will cover these points. The Grandstream UCM supports many options that allow you to manage call routing based on the caller ID information, time condition, and permission level, which is the privilege level. So in this presentation, I will explain the different options that can be tweaked to manage the routing of calls the way that fits your need and goals. In this slide, we will present the types of trunks. The UCM 6200 series support three types of trunks, which is peer SIP trunk used for peer-to-peer trunking, where the authentication is based on the peer's IP address. This type of SIP trunk is usually implemented when interconnecting multiple UCMs. We have another method, register SIP trunk, which is ideal when the UCM is behind a NAT and the authentication is based on the ID or the authenticate ID and password. The analog trunk is also supported on the UCM 6200 and this IP-PBX support up to 8 FXO ports. For the digital trunk, it is supported only by the UCM 6500, which includes digital ports to enable connection to PRI. The UCM 6500 supports as well peer SIP trunk, register SIP trunk, and analog trunk. For the privilege level, the UCM uses the concept of privilege levels when creating extensions and configuring outbound routes. Basically, the outbound rules could be assigned a privilege level from the lowest to the highest. The lowest, it should be internal, and the highest, it should be international, to restrict a group of extensions with lower privilege from dialing through the outbound route. As illustrated in the slide, the extension with the privilege level local cannot dial out through the outbound route, but all the other extensions with the privilege level national and international, they have the ability to dial out through this trunk, which has a privilege level of national. We have the source of calls where could be generated from an internal extension, an IVR, and DISA. We will cover this in the live demo. The source caller ID is enabled under the outbound route settings. This option gives the administrator the ability to include the extension numbers or the dial pattern that could dial through this specific rule. For example, in case you have two analog lines, you can create two analog trunks or outbound routes and enable source caller ID filter under the outbound route settings to enable only a group of extensions to dial out through the specific analog line. In the illustrated scenario, we have two main groups, sales and marketing. So the caller ID filter includes two extension numbers, 1002 and 1001, and we have a dial pattern 2XXX, which represent all the 2000 extension. So all the 2000 extension could dial through this route. As the extension 1000 is not included in the list, it will be rejected from dialing through this outbound rule. The dial pattern is set up once the outbound route is being created and configured. The dial pattern could be pure digits or a combination of numbers and characters. Basically, the concept of dial pattern filters outbound calls based on the dialed DID. As illustrated in the slide, the dial pattern includes all 10 digits number and all the 2000 numbers. In this case, dialing the DID 911 will be rejected as it is not included in the dial pattern. You can protect the access to the outbound route using password or PIN group. Password is just a unified PIN number used by all users to get access to the outbound route. When a call is made using the password, you will not know who actually made the call. The other alternative would be to assign a PIN number for each user using PIN group strategy. With PIN group strategy, each caller will use a specific PIN number to make an outbound call through that specific outbound rule, and the PIN group information will be included in the CDR. So only the PIN group name and the username will be displayed, not the actual PIN number used, which is good for security reasons and purposes. In this slide, so the outbound rule can be restricted based on the time condition. So you can have, for example, business hours and out of business hours. So if you have like some employees, you want to restrict the employees to dial only through like business hours, you can restrict the UCM from being able to dial through the trunk out the business of hours. You can also set up the call duration. If you have any employee calling a lot or abusing the call duration, you can minimize the call duration to like 15 to 30 minutes. So you can restrict the caller from being able to dial for a long period of time. You have another feature, which is the failover. For example, if you have the primary trunking system is a SIP trunk and the failover is an analog line. So if there is anything happening with the SIP trunk, an outage in the internet or network connection, so the UCM will automatically fail over to the analog line to dial out and have all the employees able to call out. From this slide, we will cover the inbound route features and the different settings related to it. So the UCM uses the inbound route to forward calls from your preferred trunking method. It can be SIP, analog, or PRI trunk. The PBX looks at the DID number, which is the direct inward dialing number, and make a decision to route the call to the configured default destination. The inbound route could be forwarded based on the DID number, which is a good feature to assign a DID for each internal extension and forward the inbound call to it. So more than one DID pattern could be configured with the same inbound route. Furthermore, the DID pattern could include characters as well as numbers. As depicted in the slide, we have three main DIDs, and each DID has a specific inbound route with an extension number as a default destination. For example, in our case here, we have 617.566.9300, which is attributed and forwarded to the extension 1000. So when the SIP carrier sends the call with a DID with this specific number 617.566.9300, it will be automatically forwarded to the extension 1000. For the time condition, this is another way to forward inbound calls based on time condition. We can set up office and out of office hours and configure the inbound route to forward the call to a specific default destination during business hours and forward the call to an IVR or a voice prompting message after business hours. In the case where the UCM is used for two different companies or two different departments, let's say, for example, we have plumbing and HVAC. So for the secretary to know which call is coming from, the inbound route can be customized with a different ringtone using alert info as depicted in the slide. So the phone will ring differently, or you can simply prepend with the trunk name to differentiate between the two calls or the incoming calls. The SIP endpoint device registered to the UCM can dial feature codes, which is *62 to switch to inbound route mode 1, and dial feature code *61 to switch back to the default destination. So switching between different modes can be easily done without having like a heavy access to the web user interface, which takes time, and sometimes we don't have the ability, we don't have like a PC in front of our face just to access to the user interface. Here we have the caller ID management from the lowest to the highest privilege. So the UCM gives the ability to set up the caller ID using four different ways. We have the global outbound caller ID, which is the lowest one, and we have the extension. So based on the extension settings, we can set up a caller ID, or the trunk DoD, where we can set up a caller ID and a caller ID name. And the highest one is the trunk caller ID. So for example, if you have DoD setup, make sure the trunk caller ID is disabled, because if it is enabled, it will override whatever you have in the trunk DoD. So make sure you follow the hierarchical design as presented here in the slide from the lowest to the highest, and respect this rule whenever you create an outbound caller ID. Call control using Blacklist for both inbound and outbound routes can be controlled and blacklisted. So we can include numbers and patterns in the blacklist to control the call. So as illustrated here, for example, if you have in the blacklist 011x point, so anyone who dial in with the prefix 011 and anything like any other number, it will be blacklisted and it will be not be able to dial out through this outbound rule. The same blacklist strategy will be applied to the inbound route. For example, if you have 1-800 number blacklisted, so it will not reach the default destination and it will be blocked by the UCM without bothering the receptionist. For the troubleshooting, and you have the packet capture and the syslog. In most cases, we use the packet capture. You can go under maintenance, network troubleshooting, and Ethernet capture. This is where you can take trace. So if you have any issues with the inbound outbound rules, make sure you have the packet capture tracing this issue, and then submit a ticket at helpdesk.grandstream.com so we can take a look and troubleshoot. The syslog is not really needed when troubleshooting the inbound outbound rule, but if there is any major issue like crashing, you should submit the syslog along with the core dump. So right now we're going to go ahead to the live demo. So I'm going to access to one of our UCMs and start the live demo. So before you get started, just make sure you have a SIP or analog trunk up and running. If you have a SIP trunk, make sure it is registered, so you can check this information under the system status dashboard. Just make sure you have an analog trunk registered. In my case, I'm going to use 1010, this one. It is registered. It is in blue. If it's in red, it means it's not reachable, or the registration is rejected. So just make sure you have at least one trunking method enabled on your UCM. And then you can go ahead and create an outbound rule. So you can go here under extension / trunk, outbound routes, and then you can create one. You can give it any name, and for the pattern, it could be anything you like. For example, if you need to prepend with 9, if you want to prepend with 9 for when you dial national, just make sure here you have 10 digits, and here you can strip 1. So the user will dial 10 digits just to differentiate, and then the UCM will strip the 9 and send the 10 digits to the SIP carrier. You can set up a password, the unified password, to be able to dial through this trunk, or just you can use the pin group. Here the pin group, so you can create one. I've already created like group or custom group. I'm going to show you how to create this group. So you can go to outbound routes, and then here you have pin groups, and here you can add one. So you can give it a name and add members. So in my case, I've already have like 3 members, John, Paul, and me. So I'm going to remove all these members. I'm going to create it again so you can see how it will be done. So just add, and then give it a pin number. It could be like 0123 or something like. So here I can't put like easy numbers. I'm going to use 4001. I'm going to give it to John. And then I'm going to add another number, for example 5002. I'm going to give it to Lily. Save, and etc. So this is how you can attribute multiple users for each PIN number. And then you can go back to the outbound rule, and then you edit your outbound rule, and then choose from the list the group you want to use. In my case, it's a custom group. You can see here, once the custom group is selected, the privilege level is already grayed out, because we've already like gave a privilege to this specific group to dial out through this outbound rule. So we're going to go ahead and remove this one. I'm going to speak right now about the privilege level. So under the outbound rule, you have a setting where you can set up the privilege level. Here you have from the lowest to the highest. When it's disabled, it means no one can dial out through it. So just make sure you have at least internal as a privilege level. If you want to restrict some groups, you can give it an international. Save and apply. And then you have to go back to the extension level and make sure your extension, the extension you're using, is has the right privilege. For example, I'm going to choose this one. So in my case here, my permission is internal, so there is no way I can dial through that outbound rule where the privilege level is international. So I have to go here and change it to international, so I would be able to dial out through this outbound rule. So for the blacklist, or let me go back to the outbound route. Yeah, so here you can choose the failover trunk. For example, I have, you can use, here you can add, you can add one. So I'm going to choose the analog trunk. There is no need to strip or prepend. This is just a test. And then save and apply. So in this case, when you create the failover as the analog trunk, if there is any issue with the main SIP trunk, the UCM will automatically jump to the failover trunking method and dial out through it. You can restrict the calls based on the time condition, but before you do this, you have to create an office time. Here you can add the time condition, so you have office time or out of office time. The office time could be created under system settings, time settings, and you have here office time. So in my case, I've created one from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. You can do whatever you want with it. So you can change if you have another holidays or like another weekends. You can change here. If you have another business hours, you can, for example, if it's from 9, you can just change here from 9. For example, I'm going to choose 9 to 5:30. So this is our office time. Just save. And then you have to go back to the outbound settings and then select the out of office time. So you have office time and out of office time. So you need to create like two destinations. So here we can add an out of office time. So if we meet, so out of office time, it should be anything else, whatever outside the scope of office time. I need to mention this for the specific time. So you can create a specific time. For example, if you need to have like this would be helpful for the inbound route. Just make sure you have the office and out office time created so you can use it with the outbound route. I'm going to go cover the inbound route. So to create an inbound route, you need to choose the trunking method you're using. In my case, I'm using this one. So I have already created this one. I'm going to create another one with another DID. So I'm going to give the ID to like 00201, and the default destination should be it could be an extension or voicemail, whatever you need to choose from this list. In my case, I'm going to choose a simple extension. It should be my own extension here. Save. So here you can add an alert info. So you can choose from the list. So when I choose, for example, ring 5, save and apply. So once the call is coming from this trunk with this specific DID 2001, the phone will ring differently. So the phone 2001 will ring differently. You can also prepend with the trunk name. So the trunk name here is simple, is 21010, or you can use like a defined name. So you can give it like HVAC, for example. So on the LCD screen, once the call is coming with the ID 2001, on the LCD screen you're going to see HVAC and the caller ID, the caller ID of the caller, and it will be the phone will ring with another ringtone. For the blacklist, so you can blacklist any number. So you can choose, for example, this number. If you need to blacklist a specific number, just give it a number, or you can blacklist a pattern, for example, 1-800. So all the 800 extensions or DIDs will be rejected by the UCM. So the receptionist will not be bothered with some commercials or some marketing issues. For the caller ID management, so you can set up, this is related to the outbound route. So you can set up this one under the trunk. So you have here a trunk. So this is the highest. This is the highest one. If you check this one, keep trunk caller ID, and the caller ID should be from user. For example, 617-566-9300. This is our DID. So when I dial out, the trunk will send this caller ID number. Wherever you have in the caller ID number configured under the extension settings or the DoD. Save. So this is the highest privilege. If you need to configure the caller ID based on the DoD, you need to go back and then disable the keep trunk caller ID. And then you can go back and then edit the DoD, and then for each number you can give like specific DoD number along with a DoD name, or you can give all the extension the same DoD, or you can give it one by one. It depends on your strategy. So we have the trunk. So the caller ID could be set up based on the trunk, or for example, if this extension, for example, 2007, we're going to give it like a caller ID for 617-566-9301. So I have a specific DID for the extension 2007. In this case, this one will be used because when I go to the VoIP trunk and I edit the DoD, there is no extension 2007. So here it's not set up, and under the VoIP trunk, when I edit, so the use caller ID or keep trunk caller ID is not checked. So in this case, the extension number will send its caller ID. If the extension has no caller ID, you can set up the caller ID based on the global caller ID here. It would be under general settings, and then global outbound caller ID. It could be you have the caller ID number and name. So here I have already put 888-77999. This is just an example. You can change it to whatever you want. So this is basically how you can manage the caller ID. For the troubleshooting, if you have any issues with the inbound, outbound calls, so we always suggest you to open a technical support ticket with us at helpdesk.grandstream.com and just reproduce the issue and go to maintenance, network troubleshooting, Ethernet capture, and take the trace. And then we're going to troubleshoot what's exactly the issue. It could be a NAT issue, it could be something related to the DID, it could be anything else. So we can take a look at the trace, and sometimes we need to remote in and do a remote session and see the current configuration on the UCM to find out exactly why the UCM is misbehaving. So this is it for today's webinar. If you have any questions, I'm going to stay here to answer. I'm going to take a look at the Q&A section, and I will get back to you with all the answers. Thank you.